Hello there, good evening everyone, and welcome to the start of our study of Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous. I'm very excited to begin this study and what it's going to bring us all moving forward. And what I thought we would do today, rather than jump straight into the text, the first chapter is actually quite biographical. It's Ouspensky speaking about his travels in India and Egypt and his seeking out the miraculous, and how miraculously he finds Gurdjieff in Russia, his homeland. We'll begin that next week. What I thought we'd do is, some introductory material. There's not that much. So we'll read the foreword that comes in this edition from Marriane Williamson, as I've mentioned, and then a synopsis from Jacob Needleman, and then there'll be a bit of bonus material at the end, which I'm going to try and do each week, read from the text and then find something elsewhere which will help with our understanding and ongoing study of In Search of the Miraculous. And so, with all that being said, I'll read the foreword first and then change the station, because the essay I'm going to read as a live audio ebook. And if you're excited for the study of In Search of the Miraculous and everything I'm doing here at Book Club, please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel and share the show with your friends, and you can support further in the description. But for now, I'm going to read the foreword to this edition. It's not in any of the older editions, so it's only with this 2001 Harcourt publishing edition where the foreword was added. Before that, it just goes straight into chapter 1. It's very short, and so I'll read it for you. I first read In Search of the Miraculous over 25 years ago. I can see myself in my mind's eye now, sitting on the grass in a pleasant blouse and bell-bottoms, with long hair and beaded earrings, completely dazed, as in book after book a new world opened up before me. These were the days of my first encounters with the I Ching, the Seth books, the Tao Te Ching, the Tarot, Russian literature, medieval philosophy, Mircea Eliade, St. Augustine and more. All of them took me far beyond the rather narrow spiritual confines of my life at that point. Adding to the list P.D. Ouspensky and G.I. Gurdjieff, I crossed the line into full-time seeker. Over 25 years later, I'm still seeking. It gets into your blood. I know that I am not alone in having had my soul stamped by certain books at certain times. There are authors and writings that transform you as you read them, and for me, In Search of the Miraculous was such a teaching. If I were to choose one word to describe its influence on my life, that word would have to be foundational. For the generation growing into its spiritual maturity in the 1960s and 1970s, reading Ouspensky was mandatory reading. If you hadn't read In Search of the Miraculous, then you hadn't learned your mystical basics. Clearly, In Search of the Miraculous became a touchstone of 20th century spiritual literature. The extraordinary tale of Ouspensky's relationship with his teacher Gurdjieff and the revelations of what he learned from him have informed millions of readers on the metaphysical path. Today, when so many have read so much about the topic, we are living at a time when seemingly all those with a handful of spiritual opinions have come to believe that they should publish them. More than ever, it is important to discern the classic texts from the spiritual trend of a particular day. In Search of the Miraculous is just that, a classic, and as such there should be many young people now, just as I was young when I first read this book, who sit on the grass as I once did, and have their minds blown, as I did then, to see beyond the veils of illusion to the spiritual truths contained herein. And for those who are not young, but are new to the path, then this is for you as well, a perfect place to begin your search. If you are looking for source materials, then read this one book and allow it to blow away the rocks that have held in place your more mundane assumptions. Gurdjieff was a magician when he lived on earth, and one gets the feeling he is a magician of some sort even now. Ouspensky was compelled to sit at the feet of his teacher Gurdjieff. So do we too, reading this book, begin to feel the magical spell that the extraordinary teacher casts on the minds of those he taught. I learned from him. I am learning from him still. It's a learning that never stops. And yeah, a few points there again. It's a nice foreword. And where she says, what does she say? How certain books make a stamp in your soul. I know that I am not alone in having had my soul stamped by certain books at certain times, and this book definitely made a stamp on my soul. And again, she says, if you're young and new to the path, it's for you. It's a perfect place to begin. And if you're older and looking for source material, so yeah, that's a very nice foreword from Marriane Williamson. And now for a moment, I'll just change the station, and then I'll read Jacob Needleman's essay. So here we are. Hello there, Audrey. Welcome. Now we will read In Search of the Miraculous, a Synopsis by Jacob Needleman. The book is written in the form of a personal account of Ouspensky's years with Gurdjieff, and the ideas of Gurdjieff are presented to some extent in their chronological sequence against the background of the conditions of life which Gurdjieff created for his pupils during the chaos and upheaval of pre-revolutionary Russia. In addition to being a faithful presentation of major aspects of the Gurdjieff teaching, the book thereby also provides much material about the life of Gurdjieff and the early history of what has now become known as the work. The book's form also allows Ouspensky to communicate to the reader what he clearly considers to be the necessary emotional correlates of these ideas. This is done with refreshing honesty and extraordinary skill, and in a variety of ways, often through Ouspensky's describing the difficulties he and others encountered in understanding an idea, or the shock when understanding finally appeared, and often the sense of joy or urgency when realizing this was the great knowledge, the miraculous, of which one had dreamed, but that the demands it made upon the seeker were correspondingly awesome. Great care is taken throughout the book to characterize the master-pupil relationship between Gurdjieff and his circle. The resulting picture of Gurdjieff is of a man obviously possessing immense wisdom and personal power, capable at once of painfully stripping away the pupil's mask while carefully guiding him through the emotional and bodily experiences necessary for the process of deep learning. The information and speculations which Ouspensky offers about the sources of Gurdjieff's knowledge and about his motivations for acting as he did in various situations, rather than satisfying the reader's curiosity about Gurdjieff, communicate instead the impression of an indecipherable man, doubtless one of the most enigmatic men of the 20th century. Finally, the form of the book allows Ouspensky to present the Gurdjieff ideas in a specific psychological sequence and in carefully selected juxtapositions without calling this strategy to the attention of the reader. As for the contents of the book, it touches on nothing less than the whole of the vast Gurdjieffian philosophy, cosmology, psychology, and guidelines for living. Although the book's subtitle, Fragments of an Unknown Teaching, is presumably meant to indicate that the connectedness between all the various ideas cannot be made intellectually explicit, but must be discovered through experience, and although from a certain point of view it must still be considered a preliminary treatment, nevertheless the impression of an awesomely comprehensive system of ideas is inescapable. What follows is necessarily an extremely truncated abstract. The author begins by describing his first meeting with Gurdjieff shortly after he, Ouspensky, had returned from India in search of a school of higher knowledge. To Ouspensky's surprise, this man Gurdjieff, whom he is meeting in his native Russia, seems to possess that knowledge which Ouspensky had twice travelled around the world seeking. Moreover, Gurdjieff has organized a group, structured along unfamiliar but intriguing principles, to study this knowledge. There are esoteric schools, Gurdjieff tells him, but the first thing to realize is that a very special sort of knowledge is needed, even among esoteric teachings, in order for a man to have results corresponding to his full possibilities. And the first thing necessary is for a man to see how far, in fact, he is from these possibilities. Man, sage Gurdjieff, is actually not a man. He is a machine. All the attributes of man, freedom, understanding, love, creativity, are not his until he works for them. Man can cease to be a machine. He can become conscious, but first he must see his complete mechanicalness. This is extremely difficult, and very few can wish for or bear to see the truth about themselves. Conversations with Gurdjieff continue until gradually a group forms itself for the sake of studying and putting the ideas into practice. Man's possibilities are very great. Gurdjieff tells them greater than they can imagine. It is, he says, a question of actually forming within oneself something tangibly permanent, something higher and more real than the physical body, which is all there is of ordinary man, no matter what he may imagine of himself. Gurdjieff presents to Ouspensky's group the teaching about the soul that can be developed in man, and this is juxtaposed to Gurdjieff's teaching about the aim of his work, namely the development of being in man. Man is not. He is only a fragmented and veiled collection of personages masquerading as a real self. The real self must be formed through work, through a specific form of suffering, a discipline. Such discipline lies at the heart of the great tradition, but this path does not exist in the modern Western world. At the same time, there can be several forms of this discipline, some quick and some slow, some suitable for modern man, some unsuitable. Gurdjieff describes his teaching as representing the fourth way, not the way of bodily struggle, the way of the fakir, nor the way of purification of the emotions, the way of the monk, nor the way of the purification of the mind, the way of the yogi. The fourth way works on all aspects of man at the same time and requires no renunciation or belief. It can be, and indeed must be, practiced in the midst of ordinary life conditions. It is thus easier and faster, but also, in another sense, far more difficult than the traditionally recognized methods of self-development. The difficulty consists in its inherent newness. It can never be a culturally familiar form, but must always move at a different tempo from human culture or the normally recognized functions of reason. Because it is the rapid path, it puts constant pressure upon the individual for seeing the truth about himself. Gurdjieff also speaks about the absence of unity in another, more fundamental way, which also points to the meaning in this teaching of man's potentially developed unity. The human structure, Ouspensky and his group learn, consists of several minds. These minds, or centres of perception, are the real structural elements of human nature, and any attempts to bring man to unity that do not understand these centres are bound to fail. At various points throughout the book, the subject of the centres, basically the thinking centre, the emotional centre and the moving instinctive centre, is treated and developed more and more until it becomes clear that the idea of the three centres in man is one of the most central ideas in the whole of the Gurdjieffian system. Man's confusion, his lack of unity, his unnecessary suffering, his immorality, in fact everything that characterises the sorrow of the human condition, come about because these centres of perception are wrongly related, wrongly functioning, and because man does not see or care to know this about himself. A characteristic of In Search of the Miraculous, which from all other accounts doubtless reflects the Gurdjieff teaching accurately, is the unique mingling of cosmological ideas with teachings concerning psychology. Ouspensky now begins the long, powerful portrayal of Gurdjieff's teachings about the origin and structure of the universe, the laws behind the appearances, laws and forces that govern everything from the creation of galaxies to the movements of atoms to the energy transactions within the human organism. The two basic laws of reality are the law of the three forces and the law of the octave. Every phenomenon in the universe is inevitably the manifestation of three forces, and every process takes place according to a structure symbolized by the familiar seven-tone musical scale, with steps either upward or downward, and with junctures or intervals where the development of forces is checked and requires special new energy to proceed along its original path. Ouspensky painstakingly states these ideas while taking every opportunity to quote Gurdjieff's dictum that the only way an individual can understand these cosmic laws is to observe them in himself, and this through the special forms of the work which are rapidly developing in the group of which Ouspensky is a member. Meanwhile, the reader is made aware that revolution and war are moving close. All around, the madness of mankind is becoming more and more apparent. Like the idea of the centers, once the ideas of the law of the three forces and the law of the octave are introduced, they become a permanent part of all future discussion. On their basis is built the whole of Gurdjieff's teachings about the levels and movement between levels in the universe, from the absolute through the systems of the stars, suns and planets, down to the earth and finally the moon. The ray of creation or chain of worlds is ruled by the same laws that govern the inner and outer life of man and everything in surrounding nature. For all the vastness and complexity of the material based upon these laws, however, it soon becomes clear that the most essential issue to be understood is the relationship of these laws to the nearly insoluble difficulty in which man finds himself, his prison of lies, fears and self-deception, his state of sleep, and the need for him to begin the long and difficult work of awakening to himself and of developing in himself the powers and functions which are proper to man, the crown of creation. There now proceeds a discussion of the structure of the human organism seen in the light of the universal laws of the transformation of energy. The food man eats, the air he breathes, and the impressions he experiences are intimately interconnected as forms by which energies are accepted into the organism and assimilated or rejected. This is the idea of the three foods of man, and much of the Gurdjieff teaching is understandable only on the basis of this idea. For example, the reason he places complete emphasis on consciousness as seeing, rather than on efforts of man to make changes in himself. The deepest and most important change of human nature comes about, according to Gurdjieff, through the assimilation of the energy of impressions, and this takes place through the work of awareness, without dire efforts to make changes. This work of awareness, called here self-remembering, is the principal instrument by means of which man may accumulate the force necessary for the eventual manifestation in himself of the properties of will, creative intelligence, conscience, and the power to love. A rather extensive description of the workings of a Gurdjieff group is now given and is connected to many essential and new ideas. For example, the idea that an esoteric school also is structured along the lines of cosmic law in all its aspects. The most crucial idea here, which has already been introduced but is now given a telling practical import, is Gurdjieff's teaching about evolution. He uses this term in a way strikingly different from that of modern science and different also from its current use among followers of the new religions. According to Gurdjieff, there are two major forces in the universe: the force by which the absolute manifests, which is a movement from higher to lower, from simplicity to complexity, and a movement back toward the source, a movement upward towards the unity of simplicity. The latter is evolution, the former involution. Past a certain stage, evolution is not and cannot be automatic, mechanical. It requires special work and conscious discipline. It can only proceed through individual human beings working together. In short, the evolution of man is neither the mechanical biological process of modern science, nor the social or planetary phenomenon of the contemporary Aquarians. The fascinating details of the structure of Gurdjieff groups that appears in this portion of Ouspensky's book are more understandable when it is seen that human evolution requires extraordinary conditions of individual and collective effort, conditions which go against the grain of every known psychological, religious, or social organization. In the latter half of the book, numerous ideas are introduced which both amplify those already given and at the same time provide a completely new angle of vision on the whole system and which also seem an integral part of the whole. There is something about the intensity and underlying urgency with which this book is written that gives each portion the rather rare characteristic of seeming new on each reading, just as the whole system keeps being redefined over the course of Ouspensky's years with Gurdjieff. We are introduced to the idea of essence and personality, the division of human nature between what is man's own and what he acquires. We learn of the existence and role of other centers besides the three basic centers. One of the most dramatic and personal sections of the book occurs in this latter part, where Ouspensky vividly describes experiences of an inexplicable nature regarding his relationship with Gurdjieff, experiences or facts which Gurdjieff has promised him would eventually come. It is clear that Ouspensky in this case seeks to portray a personal state of consciousness which he believes is unlike anything in the known mystical literature of the world. More than anything else, however, personal relations described in this latter part of the book partake of a unique quality of feeling which may strike the reader as puzzling, even chilling, yet perhaps also as evidencing new possibilities of the reach of the human heart. Ouspensky's decision to leave his teacher, poignantly but tersely described towards the very end of the book, has this same ambiguity in the most extreme degree. Has Gurdjieff veered away from a certain right direction, or has he brought Ouspensky to a stage of inner development which can only proceed further through the creation in the pupil of an entirely new and unknown human emotion? Chief among the new ideas introduced in this portion of the book is the mysterious nine-pointed diagram known as the Enneagram. As explained by Ouspensky in several sections, it is an ancient symbol, never before made known, which represents the fundamental laws of transformation that have already been described in the whole of the book. It is thus par excellence Gurdjieff's diagram of the organic unity of everything existing, the law of the three forces, the law of seven, the process of assimilating the three foods, the patterns governing the transmission of esoteric knowledge, and the structural dynamics of every living thing in nature, including the incomplete being, man, myself. Jacob Needleman is professor of philosophy at San Francisco State University and the author of many influential books, including The New Religions, The Heart of Philosophy, The Money and the Meaning of Life, and his most recent work is Time and the Soul. Hello there. So that was the Foreword by Marriane Williamson and Jacob Needleman's Synopsis. And hello there, Audrey, and thanks again for your generous super chat. And Rob's asked a question. Hello there, Green Grapes. Rob asks, does Gurdjieff's mask, another word for ego, and I would say more accurately he would call the mask the personality. He has these two terms, that essence is what is your own and personality is what is acquired. So when we go to work, we have a certain personality. When we're at home with our family, we have a certain personality. When we go out with our friends, we have a different personality. And so Gurdjieff would say that these are all different masks that we wear and put on. And our goal is sort of to awaken and go back to essence and away from personality. So I'll just give a brief commentary on those ideas from Jacob Needleman, and then, as I said, I've got some bonus material coming up after this on a separate stream, so I hope you'll join me for that too. But excuse me, there's much to take in, even from that synopsis. It can be quite overwhelming, the amount of material that Jacob Needleman shares, and all of these ideas develop gradually throughout the course of the book, just like Needleman is describing. And the very first thing that we learn is that man is a machine and he's asleep. He lives in an unconscious state of sleep and just reacts to everything. He can do nothing. And Gurdjieff asks us to verify this for ourselves. He doesn't preach or give us a dogmatic religion. It's more like Buddhism. Go and verify it for yourself. Experiment, observe. And this is, like Needleman mentioned, the self-remembering. He says before one can do self-remembering, they have to build up a collection of observations about how they're asleep all the time. They never remember themselves. You know, you're walking along and you're daydreaming, and then you come to. And these are important moments when you come to and you realize, I've been asleep for so long. They're very important and powerful impressions. And Gurdjieff talks about impressions. Then there's the law of three forces and the law of seven, which are explained in the book. Then there's the ray of creation, which is a fascinating, almost secular diagram for the proof of God. So if there's any atheists or agnostics out there, Gurdjieff's ray of creation diagram and his commentary on it ultimately proves that there is a source. He calls it the absolute. Plato would call it the one or the good. And of course, all the various Abrahamic faiths would call it God, Allah, Jehovah, Elohim. And so it's nice. This diagram is very helpful to understand not only the creator, the absolute, but also how the universe was created, Gurdjieff's cosmology, like Needleman says there. And also, the book has a lot of ideas, but interspersed is Ouspensky's experience, but also the biographical nature of the book. Like I mentioned at the start of the stream, the first chapter is purely biographical. It just tells of his returning from India, his time in Russia, Petersburg, I think it is, and how he comes to meet Gurdjieff. This what's the term? The struggle of the magicians, I think, is a dance that Gurdjieff puts on, and Ouspensky is taken by that. I'm sure that's what it's called. And so, yeah, you have the ideas, Ouspensky's experience with the ideas, and Gurdjieff and the group, as it's called, and also the biographical nature of the book. So, yeah, that was the first part. And like I said, some bonus material that I'd like to share with you. I mentioned in the other in the other video, there's this is Ouspensky's other book, The Fourth Way, which is a sort of question and answer, his questions and answers to his pupils in explaining the work, The Fourth Way. And this is Maurice Nicole's commentaries on the teachings, the psychological teachings of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. And so in both of these books, there are introductory remarks from both Ouspensky and Nicole. And so that's what I'd like to share with you. But sadly, we're going to jump onto a different stream so that it's a standalone stream in itself. And so if you're still interested and want to come with me for that, I'll set that stream up and it'll be ready in 3 to 5 minutes. And then we will read Ouspensky's own words about the Fourth Way in a separate book much later than when he wrote In Search of the Miraculous, and also Maurice Nicole's thoughts on the Fourth Way also. So I'll hope you'll come along and join me for that. Like I say, just hang around on the channel and I'll set that up and it'll be ready in the next 5 minutes. And I hope to see you there. And I'm very happy that we've begun our study of In Search of the Miraculous. And yeah, let's keep going. So yeah, I'll set up a new stream and I'll see you shortly. Okay, see you there, guys.